question, why was it that you had African-American males standing on the corner when other people were working? That's the way they wrote it up in the article. Okay. So one of our community leaders decided that he had the answer. And he said, I got the answer for you if you come up with $500,000. Oh, okay. Right? And we called it the African American Men's Project. On paper, it looked great, that kind of thing. So they needed folks to kind of support it. They needed volunteers. It's always interesting when you go into certain communities, you're always looking for volunteers first, but that's another conversation for another day. Okay? So they sent me a letter. You have been chosen as one of our community leaders, and folks have picked you out, and I read the letter and I sent it back. Because I didn't, that community leader title don't work so well for me. Okay? I had a good experience with that. They sent me another letter, I sent it back again. They sent me the third letter that says, you are invited to be at the Sabathani Community Center 10 o'clock on Saturday, and we expect you to be there. I showed up. It was 146 of us. We was on the stage. We took this picture, and we was going to, fix the problem. So 146, 10 were women, all pretty much African-American males and other males of color. And then, I wish that picture now, because, you got the usual suspects. So the usual suspects are the folks that usually get called on to fix the problem in the community, and some of them get paid under the table. I ain't supposed to tell you that, right? We do. Yeah, I know you will see that kind of stuff. Well, why don't they say anything about that? No, we do. We just don't say it to you. Because we already figured you're going to use it against us anyway. Okay. But we know what's going on. And that's part of our trauma. We try to cover up for mess that we should be covering up for. Okay. But there's a history to that. So when they started the project, now I'm working deep in the community. And and so when I get deep into stuff, I start trying to think, try to look at it. Okay. And so the question I came up with, this is the start of my journey, is how do you spend $20, $30, $40 million of nonprofit money in the community over many years, and things don't change substantially? What I mean by they change, but they don't stay changed, right? Kind of seem like you're going backwards, okay? And when you ask that question, if you talk to some folks who don't live in the community, they will make statements, and I've heard folks make these statements. Well, they don't really care. It's like, oh, okay. But I raised my kids in that community. So there's folks there who care. Well, they're not doing good work. Oh, no, there's folks in the community that's doing good work. You just don't hear about them because they don't get no money. Those are the little programs that don't get no money. They're probably a little bit too invested. Okay. Got some boundary issues maybe. But they're so invested because it's who they are, right? And so those kind of pieces are the questions. Those are the usual questions. And the one thing that I came up with, the only thing that nobody wasn't talking about was trauma. You got a traumatized community, nobody's talking about trauma. Right? Now we use the T word a lot, but nobody was talking about trauma. And guess what? Nobody was talking about male trauma. Think about that. We don't talk about male trauma across the board. Don't matter what culture, what background you is. We don't talk about male trauma just like we're not human beings. And when you talk about black male trauma, oh, Lord, there's only one way you can see a black male, and that's always usually in a negative kind of way, because we're always seen pretty much as perpetrators. Okay? And so the interesting thing about it, if you don't recognize male trauma, but you want us not to abuse ourselves and others, how does that work? How does that work? And we have pain just like everybody else, and hurt people. And most of the time, the people that hurt are the folks close to them. So my work really started around let's address male trauma and also community trauma. So in my search, because I had a mental health background, because I used to work on a lock unit for a little while, they have at Northwestern as well, is I was familiar with this post-traumatic stress. A lot of people are just becoming familiar with post-traumatic stress because of the military. Post-traumatic stress really did not start out being connected to the military. It started out being connected to sexual assault. Because there's some folks who think that this is only about the military. No, this is about anybody who suffers trauma and have repercussions over a long period of time afterward, right? And so the question for me becomes down: what do we call it when we have a whole community that experiences this? Repeatedly thinking about trauma, being constantly alert, on guard, so easily startled, poor concentration, angry outbursts. Well, why do those folks do that kind of stuff? Because they're angry. And they feel like they have no control. That's simple. Doesn't make it right. Because I don't have time for right and wrong right now. Sometimes we got to look at what is and then work backwards about right and wrong. Because right and wrong ain't the same for me or you. It all comes down to your personal experience. Because some of the things I think is right and wrong, you might not think so. Avoid reminders of the trauma. So people, places, and things. So what does that look like in the community? So that was my next question. As you notice, when I put this slide up initially, there was a military man. Did you see a change? That's a mother at a funeral of her child. That happens often in the urban community. And when it happens, it's always described differently than kids who get lost in other communities. And so we come to the next one. The next thing I learned about was intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma was not recognized until 1966. And it was the result of children of Holocaust survivors showing trauma responses similar to their parents. Now remember, a lot of the Holocaust survivors were children. Okay? And one of the things about my Jewish brothers and sisters is one thing they have vowed: we or them are never going to forget this. Right? So how do you do that with children? Do you tell them the story? Some people, well, I don't know. No, sometimes it's better to tell them the story. Better if you tell them the story from love. In your experience, right? Some people might say no, maybe not. But think about it. If you don't tell them the story, but you act out the story, now the child grows up confused. Well, Mom, why can't I go down the street with the other kids? You just can't. Well, I thought you liked Johnny. Yeah, I like Johnny. It ain't got nothing to do with Johnny. But I want to go down there on the other block with the other kids. No, you can't go. I won't tell you the reason I don't let you go, because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that you might not come back. I'm afraid because I'm still having flashbacks and stuff from when I was a kid and went through this experience. Now I grow up as a child. Now I resent you because you never told me. And you hear these stories all the time. You get folks that get older and they finally tell the kids the truth, and it's like, dog, if you'd have told me that. I remember there was a gentleman back home that we named an award of, Mr. Jim Branson. He got the Bransford Award. And he tells a story about his brother who's born after him. His brother born after him is named after his daddy. He's Junior. And James ain't. And he said he grew up thinking, why did they not like me enough to call me Junior? All those years go by, and he's had problems with alcohol and all this other kind of stuff, And his mama finally told him, the reason you're not named Junior is your daddy loved me so much. He told me I could name you after my favorite role model, male role model, which was my grandfather. Okay? So when we're talking about this generational kind of thing, is how do we address that? But intergenerational trauma is that I experienced the trauma, the post-traumatic stress, and then because of my behavior, or because of we know because of genetics markers, and we'll talk about that in a second, can be passed down. Okay. So I'm getting closer. Then I get into historical trauma and following Dr. Braveheart's work. And the reason I appreciate Dr. Braveheart's work is Dr. Braveheart was doing the same thing for her people as I was trying to do for mine. She wanted to know why haven't Native Americans experienced the American dream? And on top of that, be able to explain it to her own folks, and have them start working on themselves to improve their situation. Think about that. So I understand my trauma. Now I understand why I do what I do. Because my guys always say, Mr. Simmons, now I don't feel so crazy. I knew what I was doing was kind of out there, but I've been doing it so long and it seems so normal. Especially when you're raised in trauma. Behavior that we think is abnormal, it feels normal to a person who's raised in trauma. Especially when I'm always startled and you trigger off my stuff. Now you might not understand it might be a trigger, and it's not a good or bad, it just is. Because interesting things can be triggers. People who are too nice to me is a trigger. But I have a history of folks being nice to me and not really mean it. Because it makes them feel good. Okay? Well, you don't have to understand it. You don't even have to agree with it. That's my trauma. It ain't right. Well, how dare you say it ain't right when it's mine? Because you can't handle it. So, Dr. Braveheart, talking about the emotional wounds, the mental wounds of generations of trauma. Okay? And then and in the Native American community, they don't call it historical trauma, they call it unresolved grief. Because they are acknowledging the grief of loss of land, culture, and language. Now, there was a belief that Native Americans are so stoic that they don't grieve. It's interesting how we can make judgments about how other people, if they grieve or not, according to how we grieve or not. Right? It's like men being depressed don't look like depression. It look like anger. Okay? Or he ain't depressed, he's angry. No, he's depressed, all right. He internally, he can't handle it. He's having this fight with himself and everybody else around him. But so if I don't look all sad and stuff, but I'm steadily killing myself, suicidal rate is high amongst Native Americans, then what else I got to do? Oh no, you got to really look the part and sound the part before I believe you. So that's historical trauma. Then we get to post-traumatic slave syndrome. And this is Dr. Joy. Dr. Joy. Me and Dr. Joy was together in Milwaukee about 8 months ago. I like Dr. Joy. She pretty cool. She talk a lot of mess when you get better individually. She talk a lot of mess. Little bitty woman talk mess. Okay. And for all of you who don't know what I mean by talk mess, I talk about talk stuff, say a lot of stuff that's kind of inappropriate, all that other kind of stuff. Talk mess. Okay. So the thing I preach about Dr. Joy is Dr. Joy was brave enough to use the S word, slave. Do you understand that when she wrote this book, I think over 10 years ago, that people in and outside the community was mad at her? How dare you use that word? Ain't you people over it yet? I'm going to show you a graphic to show you how much we not, but we'll get there. And then black folks, we don't want to deal with our pain. Black people don't want to talk about our trauma. We don't know how to do that because we have absorbed trauma so well that we know how to adapt more than we know how to live sometimes. No matter what you do to us, we'll adapt. Go up to Stillwater Prison. Stillwater Prison look just like the community. The only thing they ain't got no women. And that's even changed since they done had female guards. Because we got prisoners who got babies in 3 different prisons with female guards. So if there's a woman around Badly because, well, we'll get to what that is all about, but as we go on. But post-traumatic slave syndrome. The other thing I appreciate about her, she talks about both resiliency. Because see, in the black community, this lecture was written for the black community. It wasn't written for the general community. Because I'm trying to help my folks. But when I started doing this lecture, old black folks would get, well, Mr. Simmons, I don't know why you're being so negative. You know we're resilient people. What does that mean? I always, because we talk a lot about that resiliency, especially when we're doing the ACEs stuff. What that mean? Oh, because I didn't. Yeah, what that mean? I know in our community, I didn't figure out what it meant. See, resiliency from the old school in the black community was we made suffering look good. We were taught to make suffering look good. We were taught not to let you think we were suffering. Think about that. We make poor look good. And we got punished for that. You don't look poor enough. It might be our own one pair of jeans, but they will be pressed. The old young dude said, Mr. Sam, we know you old school. Oh, you got creases that will cut folks. Man, nobody put creases in their pants no more. Well, hey, I ain't trying to be you. I got creases. It might be my only pair of jeans, but they creased. We were taught to make poor look good. That was resilience. Now think about that. If you got people who run the system that poor got to look poor, according to them, oh, you ain't poor enough. And when I start talking about a welfare system, and I'll talk about that even more. But that's what the resiliency meant for us, is how you walked out the house, you had to look good. You had to look like you wasn't in pain, no matter how much pain you was in. Have pride in how you look and how you carry yourself, because we don't want you feeling sorry for us, even though maybe we needed a little bit to feel sorry. But that's how we adapt. And so that's that resiliency thing. Make it look good. Then she had bravery to talk about the negative stuff. And the reason I said that's a bravery, in the black community, we don't talk about negative stuff out loud. Because there's a history. If we talk about the negative stuff in our community, in the past, it was used against us. It wasn't used against us in a compassionate way. It was used against us in a punishing way. So we still are suffering from that. Think about it. If you're dealing with trauma, you have to find a way to deal with the trauma, right? And sometimes the things you find to deal with the trauma works, but in the long run, it don't work no more. Now it causes you more problems than it did in the beginning. Right? An example of that is about us beating the snot out of our boys. We beat the snot out of our boys. We started beating the snot out of our boys because white folks was killing our boys. That's why we beat the snot out of them. That's why. It was better for me to get your attention right now, because how did the master get his attention? Beat the snot out of us. No question, no nothing. I ain't got time for you to say why you shouldn't go outside at midnight and all that kind of stuff. And you need to understand what I'm saying. And I ain't got time to have this conversation. Oh, I'm going out. Oh, no. I'm trying to save your life. Because especially with boys down south, and actually up north in certain places too, that child might go out, that male child who could be a child under 10, 11, might go outside and somebody want to get their jollies off and cut the boy's testicles off and do whatever to him because he's a black male child. But now that we spank our kids and think it's okay, and you got sisters that say, oh, that's the most worst thing in the world, and ain't no good reason to do it, and you don't understand the history, now you make my life worse. Based on what you, in your experience is, and not mine, and think that's okay. So, Let's talk about this destructive behavior. I got a guy, I do a group with what I call baby felons. They don't like the title. Mr. Simmons, why you got to call us baby felons? Well, you 18 to 25. You're babies. Shoot. I'm over 60 years old on borrowed time, really. You know, I had a young man, talking about borrowed time, I had a young man, he said, Mr. Simmons, how old are you? You look old. I said, man, I'm 62 years old. And he started crying. And the reason he started crying, he says, you know, I never met a black man your age. And I've had that happen a lot. And then, you know, at least a black man your age who's about doing something. That's a whole nother issue. Who ain't quite broken down in the world, the whole life ain't beat him up. So we do the group. And so we talk about Trump. And so in my group, if you're in my group, if you disagree with me, you cannot say, if I say, well, I disagree, Mr. Simmons, and I say, why? You can't say, cause. My grandkids don't get away with that, right? You know, they disagree with me, they got a whole lecture. Well, Grandpa, I thought I could get away with it, but I didn't know you was looking. Oh, okay. Next time, you know what? Oh, well, make sure you ain't looking. Okay. So the young man, he come in, he gonna talk stuff. He gonna say, Mr. Simmons, I'm tired of talking about trauma. My grandmother said we are resilient people. I said, good for your grandma. What do you think? He said, we like roaches. We ain't going nowhere. And he wasn't telling no joke. And he wasn't the only one in the room who thought that. That was resilience to him. We still here. And I have had guys say, yeah, we punish him every day. We still here. Now think about that. It doesn't boil down to, we still here to irritate you. Yeah, well, you know, you still here and you still going to jail too, but that's a whole nother issue. So I said, let's talk about roaches. I'm flexible that way. So we had a class on roaches. You know, don't care what they eat, where they sleep. And when you walk in the room, you turn the lights on, they scatter. Because if you never live with roaches sit in the middle of the floor to stay warm. And if you don't turn the light on, you might go in and crunch, and slide across the floor. I always like that part. You know, and one little dude in the back, because I don't make folks talk in my group. I just watch eyes. So don't everybody look down. Because if you watch eyes, you can tell if a person's paying attention or not. You might not know what they're thinking, but you can tell they're paying attention. Little dude would sit in the back, little bitty dude, sit in the back like this. Like he gonna whoop somebody. And you would see him every now and then. So all of a sudden he said, you know, Mr. Simmons, you just described the community. Now think about that. If these young men see the community in that kind of way, why would we ask them questions about why would they do that kind of stuff in their own community? Well, we don't bother to ask them. We make assumptions that we're comfortable with because, you know, we know best about how to be humane. Okay? So this whole thing around trauma is very important. So let's talk a little bit about the Native American experience. Only good Indian is a dead Indian. There was two beliefs about Native Americans. One is that this is one. The other one was Native Americans, if you train them right, they make good white people. Now, I only do this particular portion of my presentation and have been given I've been given permission by different tribal elders because they're like, Mr. Simmons, you do okay. And that's important. Because we don't always give, we'll take stuff, but we don't always give folks credit. Without them, I don't know this. And without them, I don't know how to talk about my own pain as a community. Okay? So this is how Dr. Braveheart breaks up their experience in 6 phases. First, contact. Native Americans in some ways were allergic to whites. To their ideals, to their diseases. So we got being introduced to disease, alcohol, kill the buffalo, not to eat, but to kill off Native Americans. Economic competition. Now we're fighting over the land and other important entities of America. And the thing about Native Americans, they don't believe in wasting food. Think about it. When they would kill a buffalo, they would use the whole buffalo because it was important to use the whole buffalo out of respect. They would even pray over the buffalo, so thank them for allowing them to live. So this whole thing about wasting didn't make much sense. So now we're going to try to do exterminate. So we got the war, the invasions. Now we got people who are the first people of this continent feeling like refugees being the first people in this continent. And again, using food to punish folks to move them out. So now we start with the reservations and boarding schools. We relocate you because we want the land, or we just don't want to see you. And then on the reservations, we put folks in charge on the reservations who care less about the Native Americans. So it's like having a rule from Washington, D.C., and putting the biggest scumball in charge of the reservation. I see that often. I even see that in social services. You got the dude up top who talk all the good stuff about what we do and what we plan on doing and equity and all this other kind of stuff. And you got this jerk or jerkette down in the bottom doing all kind of crazy stuff, and then you go tell them they're doing all kind of crazy stuff. Well, they've been here for a long time, and I don't think they're going. It's like, why are you saying this if you ain't gonna do nothing about that? Oh, that's because when you in power, you can do that. And I see it all the time. And so you got folks some of the uprisings and some of the reservations were men who all they wanted to do was feed their children. Because dude is selling the meat to other folks and only leaving the raw fowl meat for the Native Americans. Several of those uprisings on the reservations was because of that, trying to protect one's family. So now you've got this whole group of people that you done forced to be dependent on you, and then as it goes on for a long time, now you want to blame them for being dependent on you. Now we got the boarding schools. So if we take the little children without your permission and take them to the boarding schools, cut their hair, change their language, and all this other kind of stuff, we can make them into good white people. Then we send them back because, it didn't quite work. We send them back. Now we got these adults who are confused, who've been sexually abused, and all these other kind of stuff, and then be surprised when they do it to their own children when they get back. Or they drink themselves to death. And then there's another story about how many little Native American girls were given up for adoption to good Midwest families and been told that they were white. And they didn't know it. There's a whole group of them up in northern Minnesota that got a little support group. They're all about 50, 55 years old. But if I don't see your kids like I see my kids, I can do that. Them and us. And then you got the last set of forced relocation. We want some more of your land. We want some of that reservation land, so we're going to move you into the city. You'll get great opportunities. You'll get jobs, and all this other kind of stuff. And then you end up with Little Earth down in Minneapolis. 6-block area. Okay? They got problems in that 6-block area, and I only live 6 blocks away. And I call it the urban reservation because that's how it's ran. They got their own gang members and everything, and them cats ain't nothing to play with. Shoot, the brothers don't go over there. They might think they bad, but they ain't going over there to Little Earth. And then we get the government cheese, processed food. Ain't good for nobody. Ain't been good, especially good for black folks and Native Americans at all. Processed cheese. Make good, that processed cheese make good, cheese sandwiches because it was all lard. Yellow looked like yellow grease, just kind of melt well. Processed meat. It's interesting how we talk about soul food, but soul food ain't good for you. Any food that you cook yourself is better for you than processed food. And especially original soul food only had meat in it to flavor it, unless it was chicken. Okay. Chicken was full blended, But the salt pork and stuff like that was only put in the greens to flavor it. It wasn't to put in the greens to eat. So, I'm tired, so I'm running my mouth. Okay. So forgive me. My cattle at home were better cared for than these unfortunate persons. This is a Union Army officer who had never been to a plantation before. Now, this white individual from up north, I don't think he felt one way or the other about Africans who were enslaved. But he seen enough humanity in them to know that the conditions they were living in was horrific. This is his quote. So I like using this quote because when we talk about the African American experience, we start with chattel slavery, 1619. Why do we call it chattel slavery? Because it rhymes with cattle. That's one. But American slavery is one of the only slaveries that actually bred human beings. By the time slavery was at the end, they had the perfect slave. They had Mandingo slaves, which were larger Africans that they would actually bred with large women because they could survive better in the field. Now, so for some of us older folks, and there's not a lot of us, but if some of you remember Jimmy the Greek, there was a commentator called Jimmy the Greek, and he used to do sportscasting, right? And they caught him in the bar. He was drinking. And he got to talking, and they asked him about black athletes. You know what he said? Oh, yeah, black athletes are good at football and basketball because they was bred like that in slavery. High hip bones and all this other kind of stuff. They was bred like that. Channel 4 took him off the air instantly. Black folks, we cracking up. Speak it, Jimmy, speak it. But the CBS couldn't handle it. He was telling the truth. The movie Django. It wasn't a great movie. I enjoyed it though. That was not a cotton plantation. That was a breeding plantation. That's why they had all the black males. They was moving from one plantation to another. They were Mandingo slaves. 1808, they stopped importing Africans as slaves. That don't mean they didn't sneak in. But by then, they didn't have the perfect slave. They didn't want to mess up their little stock. Think about that.